Hey, good to see you. Thanks for coming. Another episode of Wireframe brought to you by Design Systems House. I'm your host, Donnie D'Amato, and today, of course, we're going to talk about Config 2026. As you can see, I am not in San Francisco. I am in my studio here in New York. Maybe one day I could do a wireframe live from Config, but for right now, here I am in the comfort of my own studio going to talk to you about all the announcements that happened at Config. I'm sure if you're listening to this, you probably know a little bit about them, but I'm going to give you some of my insight into the features that they've added and some of the things that they showed off, just to give you some more things to think about in terms of the perspective that I have. But before we get into that, a couple of updates because I don't have a guest today. It's been a couple of weeks since I haven't had a guest, which has been a great thing because I love having guests on here. It breaks up the monotony of me just talking to you the whole time. But we've had a lot of great guests on for the last couple of weeks. If you've missed any of them, of course, go to wireframe.ds.house, which is probably where you've gotten this from, and check out some of these great episodes that we've had. Lots of fantastic folks that we spoke to, that we even called back to previous episodes on, just to go ahead and kind of tie everything back together. So really cool stuff in there. And if you want to be on the show, you could absolutely do so by visiting wireframe.ds.house, because I'd love to have you and love to discuss what you're working on or the struggles that you're having in the industry. Any of that stuff would be, something that I'm interested in sharing as well with the world along with you. So if that's interesting to you, absolutely. Additionally, very, very important, this Monday is my first Undefined event in New York City. I've been working very hard on this event for, of course, the past 6 months. You've, of course, heard it about on the show earlier this year about me working on it. And it is all coming down to this Monday. So this Monday, there are still seats available. So if you go to undefined.ds.house, you can still RSVP to be a part of the event. Again, the whole idea is it's kind of game show like, but I'm realizing that the word game show is also not landing all that well. Speaking of that, I spoke with Kevin last week on the show, and I was telling him about it after we finished our episode, and he was admittedly a little bit had a little bit of anxiety, be like, oh, why am I don't want to be a contestant, etc. And it says, well, no, you're not like in the spotlight for the event. The audience is all the contestants. We'll talk about tech stuff, and he says, oh, I have to go, right? So I'm still working on the elevator pitch, trying to turn it less into a hostage situation. I'm hoping with the videographer that I'm going to have next week, I can create that sizzle reel that really gets the understanding and the gist of what's going on in Undefined. So I would love for you to be a part of it. Please, again, undefined.ds.house. And in fact, it is now featured on the What's Happening in New York Luma homepage. So if you go to NYC's homepage on Luma, on Monday, you'll see Undefined right there, which is so cool. Just ended up appearing today. So I'll make a post about that on LinkedIn later. Other things, I actually haven't plugged my book in a while. So heck, here's the time for me to plug the book. Here it is. Ms. on Mode, if you are doing anything in relation to theming, especially multi-brand and multi-dimensional modes, I talk about that in this book. And in fact, I also briefly in the third chapter do talk about how AI fits into this ecosystem. And basically how we might want to use it to curate different expressions. So Ms. on Mode, you can go to mode.place for that. Okay, now that we're done with all of my plugging for now, even though I have more plugs to do maybe later, but for right now, I have more projects that are working on. But let's get into the actual topic for today, which is Config 2026. So like I said, I'm not there, but I did see the keynote earlier today live, and I had some initial reactions to those things that were being shown. So I want to go and bring up the accompanying post that was made today about all the stuff that was included into Figma. So let's go ahead and go to that post here. All right, here we are. And I'm going to put myself right there in the bottom. Hi. Okay, so basically here's the post from Dylan himself, the CEO of Figma. Config 2026, new materials, new tools, and more expressive canvas. Okay, so let's scroll down here. So there were 6 major things that were announced in the keynote. Code layers, Figma Motion, shader fills and effects, generative plugins, Figma Weave Tools, and Figma Agent. Okay, so let's go through each one of these just to kind of talk about what they're about and a little bit of what I saw. So code on the canvas. What this is basically talking about, where's the image here? Let's go to the show the images. What this is talking about is the ability to link code and show it on the Figma canvas. So this is not like the Figma dev mode that we've seen for a few years now, right? Where you would, try to make some design in Figma and then you would get actual code that would sometimes be okay and is improved over time. It is not that. What this is the ability to take effectively a GitHub repo and then import that as the front end to Figma. So you can actually see the UI that GitHub project represents inside of Figma. So really interesting as a initial kind of, oh wow, okay. But the second thing that I think also is really key in here is not only can you of course bring in the code and see what it looks like in Figma, you can also capture these elements inside of Figma as effectively components, make changes on those components, and then inform the AI agent that you would be working with here about the changes that you made and then go back into affect the code. Now, the interesting thing that was talked about in the demo was the whole purpose of you being able to change individual pieces from that code inside of Figma and bringing it back to the agent was specifically because if you were to do this like at a large scale, like you're going to change everything at once, that's a lot of changes for the AI agent to use, right? But when you change everything individually as small little tweaks and things like that, it's a lot easier for an agent to handle, right? So it could process that a lot easier than you trying to give it an entire Figma file and all the components and all that stuff and then shove it in and be like, make this code, right? But having the code originally, from as the source of truth that we kind of talked about before, having that as the source of truth and being like, okay, from a design visual aspect, I want to tweak this, tweak that, and I can do so very much from a WYSIWYG kind of environment that Figma provides, and then turn it back into code effectively, right? So really interesting stuff there. The question that I have from there that I haven't really found an answer to yet is when you're working inside of a design system, right, where you have this, ecosystem and this coded experience that maybe, hopefully, has been using a design system and components that have been used over and over again, are they identified as they come into Figma? Or is Figma making some, best guesses into components as they come through, right? I mean, you have things like Figma Code Connect. You think that because of Figma Code Connect that it should be able to talk to each other. And in fact, I believe in the demo that mentioned that you can use the Figma MCP to make these connections as well. So I'm hoping that in practice, if you are using, the Figma ecosystem and all those connections that are happening there, they are maintained while these translations are happening. So something to be looking into there. But I think this is another thing about where we work, right? Because one of the other things that I was thinking about is this an opportunity for a person, like a design engineer, to almost not work in VS Code and actually just work in Figma? Is that something that a person maybe wants to do? Because more and more, I see people, I'll say less and less, actually typing out code, right? We're doing a lot of agentic design, right? A lot of just prompting, the agent or the LLM and being like, hey, make this change, make that change, etc. We're not doing a lot of coding anymore, like with, our monkey fingers. It's a lot more of working with an agent for them to code it instead, right? And for folks that aren't so worried about the code quality and just want to get that output, there is something very interesting about the ability to say, okay, agent, please create the application for me, the baseline application, and then let me actually see it in Figma and make my tweaks and then bring it back into the code. There's something very interesting about that. There's detriments to that, of course, as it would be for any agentic experience, right, where you have no idea what's going on with the code. And is there some, you know, pitfalls there if there's less and less code being exposed to a person? Potentially, yes. But for the folks that are building stuff right now that effectively have no idea what the code's doing, is this improving, not improving? I don't know. I don't know. I think it's improving from a user experience point of view for the person who's actually trying to build the application, right? This is lowering the barrier of entry, getting the experience and the source of truth that we used to call it directly into the places that the designers are working that they're more comfortable with because it's very visual. I think there's something interesting there. So I think this is actually potentially a good thing if the ecosystem is fully connected, right? Fully connected. All right, let's go to the next thing there here. All right, bring design to life with Figma Motion. Okay, so basically what they've done in here is they have brought what I'll call Adobe Edge Animate into Figma. Adobe Edge Animate or Edge Animate was a product which is I think still around in Adobe that was initially introduced to help do animations on the web years ago. You might know now of things like Lottie and other things like that that are effectively trying to also do animation for the web. And I'm always very reserved when you have a WYSIWYG tool that claims it's meant to do animation on the web. And the reason why I'm reserved is because it's very easy to make an animation and that animation be wildly unperformant or underperformant, right? Where it's very sluggish on older machines and older devices or devices that I don't know are running our own local agents. I don't know. Like there's a lot of resource hogging that's absolutely happening out there, and a thing like a very poor animation, and not visually but poorly coded animation, can be susceptible to ruining the experience for the user just for the sake of making something pretty on a high-end device, right? We have to be very careful about how these animations are being introduced. Now, in the demo, it didn't actually do a good job in the live stream of showing what the actual output of this stuff is. I did see very, very blurry, but I did see that you are able to export MP4 and WebM and SVG and GIFs. So in the cases of the ones that export bitmaps, okay, you're gonna if it's a video, fine, right? It's hard to have a problem with a video. I mean, I have a video on Wireframe, a very small one, in fact, that shows off some of the episodes. So I can't really have too much of a problem with that. But the SVG in particular, I'm a little worried about that from an animation perspective. Because in order to animate SVG, there's ways of doing it declaratively, actually. So I'm curious to see if they've done that. But my expectation is they've probably used a lot of JavaScript. And when you use a lot of JavaScript, it bogs down the site and it makes it more unusable to people who are trying to achieve goals, trying to, purchase a product or just use the application. And to be very careful. So I'm curious to know what the code is that this stuff actually gives the a developer or an agent, and actually then puts it into a site and gets it in front of users. I just I don't know what's going to happen there, but something to pay attention to. So if you have access to this stuff, take a peek. I'm interested to see. All right, shader fills and effects. Okay, so this was demoed also, and I guess on this thing, it's even showing you that you could use the timeline in there, where you can like edit the way that the shaders get introduced and come out. And this is interesting. Again, I go back to the performance piece of all of this, where when you start introducing lots of shaders, you need a lot of GPU in order to make that stuff happen. And is it actually improving the experience? Again, I'm coming from a user experience engineer perspective, where are these shaders really doing something? I mean, we've had a lot of feedback about how liquid glass is just not a great experience, and people are looking for improvements by reducing the glass effect, right? So you have to be really careful about the really cool effects that you see, and are they really improving the experience, or are they just fun to have? And I don't want to kill anybody's fun, right? I'm not gonna kink shame anybody who's working with shaders, but again, I think we keep losing the user experience part in favor of the shiny thing. And in fact, I mean, shaders is talking about shiny stuff, so um, so that to be careful about there certainly. But have a good time, enjoy that. Have a just be careful about where you put it for your applications in there. All right. Let's go ahead for generative plugins. Okay, so now this is very interesting. So I said years ago, when Figma would start getting really popular, is that Figma is getting popular and basically kind of making Sketch obsolete for two major reasons. And the first major reason was specifically the was it? I think it was. Well, actually, I'm forgetting if it was the multiplayer or if it was web based. I forget which one of those reasons it was, but regardless, whatever that was, I know the other reason was the plugin system. So when we were using Sketch before this, the plugin systems in Sketch was really hard to customize. Like if you wanted to make your own plugin, it was really hard. If I remember correctly, the original Sketch plugins were written in like Objective-C or maybe just C in general or some other programming language that I didn't know. And it was just really difficult. If I remember correctly, I think they ended up turning it to CoffeeScript, but maybe that was Figma. I don't remember. There was CoffeeScript in there when I was making some plugin back in the day in oh god 2017. And yeah, so that kind no, it would have been 2018 when I was making that plugin. Regardless, plugins were a big deal in Figma, and I think that's one of the things that it really put it on top amongst all the other design applications, because when a design application didn't do what you needed it to do, making a plugin so that it could do it was really liberating, right? It brought down the barrier of entry, or not really the entry of features for people to be able to do what they need to do in a design program, right? If this thing didn't work out the way that you wanted to, make a plugin and boom, now everything's working the way you want, right? I remember seeing plugins to like make data tables in Figma and everyone's like blowing their minds like, whoa, meanwhile we're making HTML tables for forever. But plugins is a big deal. However, for a long time, of course, plugins have been gate kept by engineers making plugins, and a designer would need to learn how to code in order to make their own plugin. There's lots of stuff that could be tripping you up there, and I know the plugin ecosystem has gone through lots of iterations in terms of what's available out there. And now, of course, with AI, before announcing this generative plugins thing, of course you could ask AI to generate your own Figma plugin, no problem, it would do it, right? Well, now what Figma is doing is kind of assuming that you're going to stay in its ecosystem, right? And this is very akin to some of the announcements we've heard from Google underneath Android 17, where you're going to be able to make generative widgets on Android 17, right? So if you want to have your own custom running app on your phone, you can have Gemini generate a custom app specifically for you that you can use on your phone. This is a very similar kind of idea. If there's something in your workspace that you're working on and be like, I wish I had a plugin for this, right? You can generate it. Now, here's the situation with this, and there's a lot to unpack. Initially, this all sounds really good, right? Where I could solve my problem immediately right where I hit it, right? It's just generated, boom. I don't have to go out, make a plugin, pull it back in. I don't have to do that. It's right there. So the first problem that I'm seeing with this in particular, or I shouldn't say problem, but something you need to pay attention to, is there very much might be a plugin that exists specifically to solve the problem that you want to solve right now, that has more use behind it, has more features, and is just more robust than the thing that gets generated. Okay. And that only happens through other users testing it out, using it, providing feedback, the product development lifecycle. You've heard of it, right? So that can be encompassed inside of a plugin where you could really get a really solid, good plugin for the thing that you really want to get done, as opposed to the thing that just kind of like as a one and done, generate and done, right? Like you have to be very careful about the quality versus, the speediness, and that balance that you have to go between those two things. So maybe there's an opportunity here to, I don't know, expose existing plugins before actually building them. I don't know. Maybe that's something that you might want to consider. Now, the second thing that you have to be careful about this, and this is a um, a comment that I have had over generating UI as a whole, because I've actually been very pro generating UI for a little while now. But there's a very interesting caveat or asterisk that I put onto this stuff that I really haven't gotten to like pin down yet. And I've talked about it in a couple of episodes of Wireframe before, but I want to bring this up now, which is if you are making your own stuff, you are effectively making this bubble that is getting, tighter and tighter around you, and it becomes more difficult for you to see what's available out there when you're all in this bubble, right? It's something we call the filter bubble in communication design. Basically, when you would have, let's say, Republicans versus Democrats, and you're, one side or the other, you will continually, most likely, see that one side. So let's say you're like a Democrat, you continue to see Democratic media, Democratic news, Democratic articles, things that are basically highlighting all that stuff. Meanwhile, there could be legitimately important things on the Republican side that you're completely missing, right? That's totally possible. Whether or not they're actually being, conveyed to you in a intelligent way, that's irrelevant to what I'm talking about. There are morsels of data that you unfortunately will miss because they are being filtered out because you are stuck in this bubble that is really hard to escape when everything is catered specifically to you. So in this very small moment when there is a plugin that's specifically catered to you, you might be missing very important things that the plugin should be doing, or even you should be doing, that are being missed, but just kind of looks like it's doing okay. And I'm going to raise accessibility as one of the larger things in there, because accessibility ends up being, an afterthought in a lot of cases, and being in a bubble where you aren't being told or told that you need to do accessibility, or reminded is probably a better word, that accessibility is important and localization is important, performance is important. All these are the things that are important that could be improving the experience. Well, if you're stuck in this bubble, it's hard to remember that stuff and hard to stay on top of those things. So something to be careful about with anything when UI is being generated, or a product is being generated. Having those pieces in there that might be missed, and that expertise, have to be careful about. But something to be seen. All right, moving right along, Figma Weave Tools. Okay, so there are additional tools that have been added to the sidebar of Figma. I logged into my account. I don't have all of them that were displayed today because I don't have a paid account. I just don't have a paid account because I don't use Figma very often, honestly. But Figma Weave is effectively a node-based editor for creating things. I'm just going to say things. And now, when I say node, the node that I'm talking about is not like Node.js. This is more like a graph-based editor. So inside of, is there a image here? What's going on? No, I wish there was. All right. Well, anyway, this node-based editor basically has these items inside of a large canvas, and it's almost like how you would prototype stuff in Figma, where you have like, these lines that you would draw into different areas to show how a flow happens. So it's very much like that, except this flow is specifically for an agent, or an LLM really, to go through the flow itself to create a final output. Now, free pick, which is now magnetic, was very popular for this technique. And this technique, in fact, was very common even before this in like 3D modeling and game design, where you would have like the state machine that would be like, okay, start here, then do this, and then maybe branch off into 3 different places and do all these things. So what Figma Weave is now doing is it's basically bringing that functionality into Figma, where you can start with an idea, or combination of some things, and output a final result based on that. So what they showed in the demo for the keynote was one of the things was there was a animation that was on the bottom that was very 2D, very like kind of basic, I'll say, a couple of different, kind of geometric shapes that were kind of bouncing around. But then there was a photo of an interior that kind of looked, I guess, contemporary a little bit. I don't know. I'm really bad with naming different styles of interiors, but you can imagine an interior of a I don't know, a museum or a house or something like that. Um, and you would take those two things where effectively you wanted to take the animation and the structure of the bottom thing, and then create it in the style of the interior that was on the top. And you would see the nodes merge in. You would have a little prompt that would say, okay, what to do with these artifacts, right? And then you could see the output and you could play it and you could see the actual animation play out in the motif of the interior. I thought that was really cool. And I'll tell you what, I think the node based editing experience is really interesting as a auxiliary way of explaining the thing that you want, right? Because here's the thing I want to say. Right now, many of our experiences, our agentic experiences that we're having a conversation with UI are very linear, right? It's just going down the line here, and you're not really going back to a particular point in time. I mean, the best thing you could do is you could kind of like, type in and say, oh, can you go back to this one thing, et cetera, et cetera. And it's really clunky. And some of the things that I've discussed in there was like, oh, can we like add comments into a response so that you could address individual things? But I'll tell you what, the node based editing of like starting with something and then letting the agent respond, but then also trying something else from the original thing that we said and go somewhere else, like having that flow kind of branch off in a agentic workflow is really interesting. And something that I think I would personally love to explore is how to really combine those two things. Because I will say, like, screwing around with the nodes and how they connect and stuff like that, that could be a little bit overwhelming, especially if I have a lot of nodes and connections. Typing is obviously a lot easier to do, but then you lose a lot of the ability to branch. So I'm kind of curious if there's something that can bring these two ideas together effectively. But regardless, the ability to go ahead and have branching different designs and explorations on the canvas, this is huge. This is huge. And having it inside Figma, I think, is going to be a really big deal. So I'm just curious about, could it do more like deterministic stuff? Right? Does it always have to be an LLM that works through all these patterns? Because, like I said, in game design and in shaders and stuff like that, in 3D modeling, this node-based editing has happened for a really long time, and that's completely deterministic, right? Each little node is making a change off of the, some kind of base with some operations that are happening to it. I mean, if you're familiar with Token Studio, they have a node-based editor that's also very deterministic, that's like making changes across those things and making scales and other things through the values of tokens. So, you know, there's deterministic ways of doing this. So I'm curious to know if Weave will also have deterministic ways of being able to make changes and things like that. Like, imagine being able to do like more with variables, right? Right now, variables is just a table. Imagine being able to like generate variables deterministically in the values through Weave, so that you have this kind of visual idea. I think that could be cool. I don't know if that's available, but I think that could work, right? All right. And then finally, that's been announced here, an agent that knows how you work. Sorry. Of course, they put a chat window inside of Figma. Like, I'm sure it was there with plugins before, right? Working with Claude and the MCP, right? But now there's a dedicated chat inside of Figma for people to use. It is not available on the free plan. I tried. I think they're going to actually open it up to use it, of course. But we've seen this already for years. In fact, the config that I went to in 2023 was when they first launched, I think, AI in there and generative stuff in the canvas, which was awful at the time. As we know, it has improved year after year, which is great. But we knew that there was going to be an agent in the canvas, and much of the things that we saw in the demos uh, the demos were using the agent in order to make these changes happen. So we could see a lot of work being done to that is more focused on being agentic and focusing on the what's it called, um, the chat, right, working with the agent as opposed to the UI. Now, all that being said, right, let's go back over um, to me. All of that being said, a lot of really interesting features there. Obviously, AI is a big deal. Has to be a big deal. It has to. You have to stay relevant in there. So the question, of course, ends up being: is Figma still relevant? Right? Like that's what we were kind of hoping for here in config. Is like, okay, Figma, how are you going to stay relevant with all of these design tools and all of this AI that's effectively being able to generate, UIs and components and all of this other stuff? How are you going to be relevant? This is how they're attempting to be relevant, right? And I think these are good steps in a direction, but it's hard to say because the way that we work right now has changed so dramatically in the past year that a lot of these companies, I mean, Figma certainly included, are just trying to find out how to stay afloat. Admittedly, that's really what's going on here, because just because anybody can actually build their own Figma, we've seen that in the news. It's again hard for any other company to go against selfware, right? I was just in a workshop. Well, not really a workshop. It was more a presentation because they were presenting stuff. But they were showing how, in order to do the work that they were doing in this evals presentation, they would just generate a UI to help them go through the evaluations. Right? They would have and she would like, okay, human annotated here, and you would make all the open codes and the actual codes for it, and it was just and that's part of their process. They don't actually recommend any particular tool. They actually say, no, just have Claude generate the tool for you to help you, right? So this is very interesting where, again, our customers are more and more being able to generate the things that they think that they need. So, yeah, I guess you have to show animations and shaders and really exciting shiny things, because the user experience is not something that designers are really controlling as much anymore traditionally, right? Traditionally. So now it's all a matter, it seems, of how shiny can we make it, right? That's what it sounds like. So something to think about. Now, before we wrap up today, I got a notification today because I thought this was very relevant. Let's look at let's look at what I got here. This is Figma's stock, and this is just the past day. So just this day, and in here we could see that at the beginning of the day, we were pretty high, something around $19. Okay, well, we're now at about 1874, so it's dropped today after all the announcements. Okay, let's look at the 5-day. Okay, here's the 5-day. You could see it was high yesterday. Look at how high it was yesterday. Like the anticipation, and the day before, the anticipation. Look at that, right? It was at $20. Okay, let's look at the past month. Past month, look at that, right? It's actually significantly down. Like we had a nice situation here. It was at 27 on the 1st of June, right? And now it's all the way down at 18. All right. Now let's look at this past 6 months. Past 6 months. Okay. In January, we were at 38. Okay. And again, we were all the way down at 18 now, so we lost 20 bucks here. Year to date, which is the same. Sorry, we'll move on. Past year, again, going down. 5 years, trends down, and then all time. There you go. So yeah, it opened up on July, so nearly a year ago, at $115, and we are now at $18. Okay, so something to pay attention to here, folks. Because again, we were expecting, for this to solidify Figma in the space and go, okay, right, Figma's back, it's doing the right thing, and it's stable place in the market. Unclear, right? Unclear. You know, I saw a post on LinkedIn today, and I've also been checking out the design system channels as well. And people are actually really disappointed because there's been a lot of focus on design systems recently because that's where the consistency comes in, right? Where, you know, normally agents are just going to go ahead and vibe anything and it just shows up. But for folks that are trying to have a consistent experience, you need a design system. So you have guidance and best practices that you can codify, to repeat over and over again. And the agents need that stuff. And it's a good practice to do so. Well, we really didn't see any design system stuff in the keynote, right? Like we didn't, you know, I mentioned earlier about the code layers thing. Like, does it use a design system? Who knows? One of the larger jokes that I've been seeing around recently is percentage-based line height. I don't know if it's there or if it's not there. It certainly wasn't mentioned in the keynote. I can't imagine it being all that important to mention in a keynote. But I've heard more than one occasion people asking for percentage line height, and I don't know if we have it or not. Whatever, but yeah, it is interesting the lack of design system feature focus that we've saw. Again, maybe this is a lack of imagination that we've have right now, where like maybe Figma Weave could be a design system with the node-based editor. Maybe that's where that is. Maybe again in the code layers, there's, you know, design system calling back in there, right? I mean, is Figma Motion going to be able to have systematic stuff for, you know, the timeline, like easing and stuff like that? Are you able to use that there? I think I saw like a panel that kind of suggested it, but I don't know, right? Hard to say. But yeah, it's really interesting the direction that they decided to take about, you know, we're not really going to talk about any design system stuff. Now there might be talks about design system stuff there at San Francisco and the Moscone Center that I don't know about because I'm, you know, just kind of working here in New York. But maybe there's design system stuff that we haven't caught. But look, if there is, let me know. You can leave a comment in the bottom about the design system stuff that you may have saw over there. So that would be cool. But yeah, let me know what you think about config and what the any of the features that you're really excited about using, or anything that you're really disappointed about. I'm interested to know about that. In fact, there might be a question or two, or a game or two, I should say, talking a little bit about config at Undefined on Monday. Could be very topical. Could be very topical. I hope we get something interesting in there. Couple of other things that I'm going to kind of announce, so to speak, is I have a new project that, of course, I have a new project that I've been working on. And it's actually a little bit related to the conversation that I had with David White Wolf a couple of weeks ago, and actually when we first met about a month or two ago, which is the intersection of AI and accessibility. If you want to get a preview of that project, if you are in the Web Alley accessibility Slack workspace, I will be posting it there probably next week for feedback. I'm going to have it there for feedback for about maybe a week or two, just to see, you know, how people feel about it. I've already sent it to a couple of trusted people just to take a peek at. They're very excited about this. But I'm going to have something to share in there probably next week. And I'm also updating my personal website, in fact. So there's something to look out for there. I'm hoping not to release both of those things at the same time because, you know, how hard it is to go ahead and promote anything. But yeah, I have a couple of things, of course, that are working out there. So look forward to those things and checking them out when they're available. All right. I've been talking enough. So, but let me know how you feel about all the stuff at Config. But I think that's a good time to end here. So that's our show for today. Thank you so much for watching. Before you go, please help out the show by smashing the like and subscribe button. just to get notified the next time that we go live. And feel free to continue the conversation on the official Design Systems Discord by going to discord.ds.house. Play nice in those comments, and I'll see you on the internet. Bye.